Welcome to the Autism Chronicles podcast. My name is Esther. Please follow us on our autism journey as we share personal stories, challenges, breakthroughs, and all the practical tips that we have learned raising our son Ziza. I hope our conversations inspire and encourage people on their own autism journey. This podcast will not give any medical advice, just a space to share, learn, and grow together. Hi, this is episode 2 of the Autism Chronicles. If you haven't watched or listened to episode 1, please do.
Yeah, so episode 1, I think we covered early detection and a little bit of Ziza's story, right?
Yes.
So I think it's one that is worth checking out, just so people can know. So what are we talking about today, Lizzie?
We're talking about getting a diagnosis and the steps to take.
Steps to take to get it. I think that's one of the most important things, because I think getting a diagnosis is sort of confirming or
your
facing the
suspicions.
reality.
Okay.
But I'm guessing that for people in Nigeria, I mean, I want to say Africa, but I think Nigeria is whatever. That's not that easy, right?
No, it's not. It's not. It's important. It's an important topic because I feel like in Nigeria, people just have this list of symptoms or what to look out for. So I find that almost every child who has like a developmental delay, has autism. That's everybody just says, "Oh, I've seen somebody's child and he behaves this way. I think your child has autism."
Or my cousin too has autism.
So now it's like, actually, it's not only Nigeria. It looks like everybody around the world, everybody has autism. Yeah. But a lot of people are not actually sure what it is, because there are so many different... I think it's the same as autism
and ADHD and all that. Like, there's some people that just like, people say, "Oh, I think I have ADHD." And I'm like, you don't understand what you're saying. Like, if you really understand what it means, you'll not be wishing it on yourself or anybody else. I mean, and somebody told me that some people are just badly behaved, and then they just
say that they
quickly run to ADHD or autism to excuse their bad behavior.
Yeah. So
I think it's important before people go about, there's a lot of buzzwords these days, and especially on social media, everybody now, it seems like everywhere you scroll, you find somebody claiming that they have autism or they have ADHD or something, and because of that, I think it's important to really, really get that diagnosis so that you really know the things to do to sort of help yourself. So how easy was that? I mean,
it wasn't easy, because I mean, we're talking, Ziza is 15 years old now, so I think things are a little bit better in the Nigerian scene. But if you recall, 15 years ago, we pretty much had nothing.
Yeah,
we had nothing. First of all, we didn't even know anybody who had autism. Right. And even seeing a doctor, we mentioned in episode 1, seeing a doctor, and the doctor didn't even know what we were talking about, so there was really nobody to see.
There were several doctors. It wasn't even only one.
So not just one, a lot of pediatricians actually. And so the thing is, it's important to get a diagnosis, because it's like... just about anything. You want to do something or you want to achieve something, you make a plan, right? Without that plan, you don't know where to start from, you don't know where you're going to. So you need a diagnosis, first of all, to say this is what your child has, and then that way what plans to put in place.
Yeah.
What are you doing? How do we achieve? How do we get the child to thrive? How do we make things better?
Or even just being sure that it's autism, or even being sure that, because, and then just going back to Nigeria and Africa, because it's not a field that many people have sort of it's not a field that we sort of excel at, and I think it's important here to talk about why that is, because I mean, I think there's a lot of cultural should I say, beliefs, that affect, Nigerians or Africans being realistic about mental health issues in general, right? I think because mental health issues seems to be things that people want to they want to hide away. They want to hide it away.
They shy away
They
from
want to
that.
hide it away.
Yeah.
So of course, I'm not saying that there are no mental institutions in Africa. Of course, and Nigeria there are, but then mostly those ones are more like asylums, and it's not something that they don't. It's not something that people think about as a developmental area where they want to actually support. So I guess that's one of the reasons why it's so hard. Like in Nigeria, it was almost impossible to find any doctor, anybody who sort of said, okay, you know what, here's a proper diagnosis. Of course, there was quite a lot of therapists, and I think we'll get to that part where even the therapists, you have to know which one is real or not.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Also, one thing I'd like to add is based on our structure, the way things work. So usually it's you're pregnant and then you go for antenatal, you have your baby, you give birth, right?
Yeah.
You take, the baby takes all the immunizations and everything that they need to take, in other countries, you have, as the child hits certain milestones, you have certain checks. So the baby doesn't have to be sick, At a certain age, you need to go back to the hospital for them to check the doctor. So I feel like it's easy for them to detect, when there's something wrong, Like maybe a child doesn't hear or something. Because if you're going for I'm not sure if it's 18-month check or 2 years or 24 months or something like that.
Yeah.
But for us, at least that's my experience. I don't know if it's different. That's what I know is you give birth as the moment you finish all the vaccinations that the child needs to take, you're clear. You're good to go. The only time you go back to
is that there's no follow up.
No, there's hardly any follow up. So because I feel like if those checks are actually about the child's development, it doesn't mean the child is ill or anything like that. For us, I feel like it's only when the child has malaria, he's running a fever, he has tummy ache, then you run to the doctor, and then those medical issues.
Yeah.
But nobody really takes the time to do checks to say, is this child growing, as they should, So it's difficult to pick. So by the time you notice that there's something wrong, the child is almost 2, 3 for some. Because if your child never had to go to the hospital, there was no need for you to go to the hospital to have that child checked. So, that was my experience. So you find that it's different. These are mostly parents noticing that the child's
there's something wrong,
and then having to go
to look for,
as
opposed to
exactly
say, okay, fine, once the child is out, they can say, okay, look, we've noticed a few things, but then but isn't that the same everywhere though? I think with people, parents generally notice deficits, right? It's not as if, I mean, I'm sure there's the rare occasion when I have a friend who they saw the defects on the womb. They say, okay, this child is not. But those are more physical defects.
Yeah.
When it comes to things like autism, I think, it's mostly, parents noticing deficits and going to look. But I think one of the main differences is that, in some societies, when you look, you find. You find easily. Whereas in Africa, in Nigeria, it's the finding that is the problem, not the looking. I mean, I recall when we started getting involved with the autism conference that GT Bank does, sometimes you think it's just it's a small community, but the first time that I went to that GT Bank conference and I saw the
crowd
there, I was like, this thing. There's so many families that have this issue, and unfortunately, not many of them have the means to.
True.
We were a bit more lucky, I think. Not many of them have the means to even get a diagnosis, and even if they have a diagnosis, not many of them have the means to even get the therapy and get the different things that we're going to cover. So it's a real. So I mean, and that's why. Things like this are very important, because if you can get some helpful tips and some, just some advice from someone who is in the struggle with you, at least it saves you a lot of cost, because because we had to pay for a lot of this stuff.
Yes,
right? It saves you some time, because you can start intervening early, and it gives you a sense that it's not. I mean, I remember when we were at Zia school and they had the parents. conference, the parents meet up. I mean, I think that was one of the most comforting days for me because like it was the first time I was in a room with other parents of kids on the spectrum, right? A big room, and I think it was us. It was some people from India, some people from different sort of societies. And when they were talking, I was like, listen, we're not alone, no. And some of the things that we thought were some things that we struggled with, people had more struggles, right? We were a bit more ahead than some, but behind. I remember the lady who said, oh, I have twins and they're both on the spectrum. I was like, wow, man, imagine if we had two of Ziza. It'd be quite different, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, but so going back to the story, so like I remember that we were lucky enough to be able to go to the US and get that, but I don't remember how we even found the Emory Center.
Yeah, so
the Emory Autism Center in Atlanta.
Back to what you're saying. So I think we need to like discuss what exactly should be your first step, right? So I mean, what we had were just symptoms, behaviors that he was, exhibiting, if I can say that. There are certain things he was doing and all that, and we mentioned that all the information we got was just online, right? But that's not enough because you can't self-diagnose, or diagnose a child or something like that. So I think the first place to start is seeing a developmental pediatrician. And I think that's one of my struggles because I don't think we were able to get... So they had pediatricians in the hospitals, but not a developmental pediatrician. Right, so it was difficult for us, but that's the first place to start, because then the doctor assesses your child and says, okay, this child is growing okay, everything is okay. But then, like you mentioned about deficits, if there's a problem, he will just say, actually, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he's actually we actually have, some issues here, and then they don't implement. They don't do the intervention, right? It's not their job. It's just to help point out, and then they should actually refer you to where you can get these resources.
So don't rely on Google, basically.
Don't rely on Google. First step is to see a developmental...
This podcast is basically on YouTube,
No. So, see a developmental...
I get it. Like, so sometimes it's a comfort to be able to go on Google and just search and start seeing answers. Because, I mean, it's a mixed bag, I think. It's or should I say double-edged sword, right? So on the one hand, you can get a lot of information immediately. You don't have to pay for anything. You can just get a lot of information. But on the other hand, sometimes you get an overload of information.
Yeah.
And you end up not knowing what it is.
Yes.
When we Google, you see one link in saying, oh, is autism is over. The other one is saying, oh, there's, and then, I always say people, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So it depends on who is posting all that stuff. So I wouldn't knock it. I'm saying that I'm just saying it's a mixed bag.
No, but it's okay. Just like what we did. So we basically had an idea what the issue was, but then we needed somebody to, say this is what it is,
to confirm, right?
To confirm, yes. And once we got that, so you were talking about how hard it was for us. I mean, for a lot of people that we knew then, that we eventually met, a lot of people had to get this assessment done outside Nigeria. Not everybody can afford that, but I think now, like, there are a number of developmental pediatricians. So if you go to the hospital, I know places like National Hospital, maybe Luth, and all these places should have, depending on where you are, first see a developmental pediatrician who would then confirm if the child is developing okay, and if they're not, you get referred to an expert, somebody, because it's not enough to... This is just assessing the child, but there's another assessment that needs to be done. That one is more technical. These are experts in their field then, and I think we had to go to America. We went to the Emory Center, and if you remember...
I remember how we met Dr. Maury. I think Michael Maury, right? I think I met him
No, we just it was online, to
It was
be
on
honest.
Facebook or something.
It was online.
No, I remember it was
We
Facebook.
just did research, and that was another thing, because initially we started looking to come. I think we were in the UK. We actually found someone to access Caesar, and because it was just too much. We were on a wait list. It was going to take like a year. And then we had to be referred again, going back to the developmental pediatrician.
I do remember.
The person was qualified to do the assessment. They said, I need you to be referred by your doctor. And there was no developmental pediatrician that we had in Nigeria to say, okay, yeah, come and see this person. And because, again, we're talking about early detection, early intervention, we didn't have the time. We just wanted to hit the ground running, because we just knew that the earlier we started, doing something, the better the outcome would be. So that was how we just looked to the US and found Dr. Maury, and then
I think that Dr. Maury, it was on. I think I was reading an article on online, and I saw his name on the article or something, and I went to Facebook and found him. I sent a message and I said hello,
and he was like, okay,
I'm from Nigeria, and this is and that and that. And I remember that he was quite helpful. I remember he asked me some questions about where Nigeria is. Sometimes we're not sure whether it was in South Africa or I said no, we're in the west of Africa. And then he asked us. Remember, he asked us to do videos. Remember, he told us to take your phone and send him videos of the boy. And I think we sent him a bunch of videos. And before he said, okay, look, you guys have to come over, and I recall that that's when we now went. Now went, and I think for me the experience was like when we got to the center. Again, same thing. So many parents from all over the world coming there to get assessments, and for the first time, I sort of saw like, wow, this is like there's access to resources if you can. If you're lucky enough to be able to find them, right? And I remember that he did they did a medical thing. They took blood from Ziza.
Yeah, it was a team of doctors, not just one person.
Yeah. And then they sat with us and give us some training. I remember we used to drive there like every day for a while, and then they started doing training for Zara as well, because they were like, okay, she's the sibling, so she should also know. It was quite a good experience, and then the report came out. So the question was, the question is like, so how was that period for you as well?
For me, I was just happy to have an understanding of what was going on. I just needed answers, right? And what I'll say here is, for you, I think I was more open to it than you, actually.
What do you mean?
Because I was. I recall saying
false accusations.
No, I kept saying, there's something. I've noticed something, and it was just like, okay, why are you stuck on this thing? And the whole thing that people do back home, I don't know if it happens in other places where they tell you, oh, you had a girl first, this is a boy, boys are different, but I don't want to go into that, right? What I want us to kind of talk about is, where did you have that feeling, like, were you in denial, like, oh, this cannot be my son, he can't have autism?
I can never say honestly that I was in denial. I don't think I was ever in denial, because like I consider myself a practical person. So I could see, like, you can see what's happening now, right?
There's
so
no need to.
So when I hear people are in denial, I just wonder, because I don't know if it's just me, but you can see that a child is 3 years old and is clearly, he clearly has some deficits, some of which are very obvious. Like,
yes.
Typical kids don't go around walking on their toes up and down the house every day, right? Typical kids don't like. There was a time when Ziza pooped, and the whole house, we had to leave the house, because of the smell, right? And so
it wasn't normal.
There was several things that were apparent, staring you in the face. So I think being in denial for me is not the right definition. For me in episode 1, I used the word despair a lot, because I was really, really scared for the boy, for my boy. I would use the word, I was a bit angry, to be honest with you, I was quite angry. I don't know, but I don't even know who I was angry at. So when I felt like I was angry at myself, like, is it from my genes? Then I was angry at you. Is it from your own?
No, you were.
Did your Kaduna family bring wahala to me? Then I was angry at God. I was just angry. I was like, why? I mean, I don't deserve this kind of. I deserve it. In those days, I used to use the wrong words. Of course, I deserve a normal kid, right? So I would admit to anger as one of the feelings that I had. I would admit to despair. Because I was very sad. I spent a long time being sad about about when we finally got the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And it was a mixed feeling because I was also at the same time happy because when we got that report from Emory,
yes.
and okay, fine, here are things that you can do. So it's not a I don't like to use the word death sentence. It's not like
it's not the end of
when
the
I look
world.
at Ziza now, I'm actually grateful for that time because if we didn't get that information, we wouldn't have done everything that we did over the years to get him where he is now. Which is like he's. I think now he's pretty great now. I mean, there's still things that we're working on, but so yeah. So those feelings, but I wouldn't say denial.
Yeah, I don't think I had the time. It's like maybe somebody losing somebody, and some people take a while. They just keep going. They don't have the time to grieve, right? So I didn't give myself that option, to be honest. I didn't have time like you. I think you had your moment where you cried, you let it all out and everything. I never had that opportunity. Like
I cried.
I think I was just ready to know what the problem was, and then I just wanted to find a solution, right? So I didn't give myself that time to even, go through the motions.
Like I said, I remember I said on another podcast, I said, where men and women are different. I think I was explaining to somebody that truly women are more focused on people, and men are sometimes more focused on things, right? So I think for you were really into the nurture side. Right, and focus on the boy, because I remember everything that you did at the time, the boy. But me, I was thinking, okay, I need to go and raise money now. I need to make sure that we have cash in the house.
Because there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of money to spend. I need to, and then I remember I started safe-proofing the house. Started changing the doors and make sure we have soft locks on the doors, making sure that the cooker was in a certain way so it wouldn't burn him. So I was just focused on fixing things around the house to make sure that he was safe. So maybe that sort of, but I think that's the sort of teamwork that sort of actually helps because everybody played to their strengths. Because I feel that if I had focused on that side, I would not have had the emotional how do I say the emotional, the resilience to I'd be crying every day, right? So doing those things really helped me to, I had a list of things to do. So it really helped me also manage
To someone listening, what I'll say about that is, I don't think at that point, as much as you want to wail or go through the motions, like think, oh, why me and all those. I don't think that's the time to actually do that. That's the time to get up and do something, right? And I always mention this thing: early intervention is key. Just start early, especially when you find out early enough. So there's no reason to just sit down and start thinking, what kind of problem is this or that kind of thing. It's time to get up and do something. So. Like I said, the earlier you start, the better the outcomes. Yeah. So
the second thing, so you said the first thing was to consult a developmental
pediatrician.
So and then the second thing is.
So like I said, you get referred to the expert. What you would need now is, because you need a plan for your child. Whatever.
So like a formal plan.
Yeah. So formal. So the next thing would be to get a formal assessment. Right. And like you shared the story about the Emory Center. We had a couple of people, not just one person. Look, I think there was an educational psychologist. There was I think even a developmental pediatrician was there. There was a speech therapist. But
the thing is, if you look at, for example, how in the UK you can get what they call it, something that they call it the
EHCP,
or an educational needs assessment.
Yes.
I think in the US they call it I've lost it now. The US they call it the individualized individualized education program, IEP. The thing is that in Nigeria we don't have any.
Yeah,
we don't have any.
Yeah, because theirs is everything is
not
linked.
formally.
It's linked to the system. And that's why I was talking about doing certain checks when your child is growing. You're expected to come back to the hospital, whether sick or not, and then the doctor picks it. For them also, at that age, right, the child is in the system. So at that age...
I guess that's the point, like, on this podcast is, in a place where these things are not systemized.
Yes.
Right? Like Nigeria, I think the more practical tips for where you are. So
yes.
I think number one, we've said
see a doctor.
Yes. We've said
and then get a
developmental pediatrician.
Yes.
And then we've said request, but there's nobody to request it from. So are you requesting that assessment from the doctor?
So what are you requesting? Well, maybe the right word to use is not request, because you're not requesting for anything. You're basically looking to get a formal assessment done. Because the formal assessment says, okay, the doctor is just going to say, okay, this child is not speaking, this child is, but he may say, yes, it points to autism. But you need the people in their field to actually, assess that child. So they are going to look at it. You see, so there's a problem with speech. The person in that particular area looks at it and says, okay, borderline, maybe it's nothing to worry about. If there's an actual problem, it's noted down. How mild is it? Is it a serious problem? You know, that kind of thing. They're looking at behavior. They're looking at cognition. So it's a couple of things. So it's a multidisciplinary approach, basically. It's a holistic assessment.
So but right? I think, so...
And by the time they are done...
We've come a long way in the past 15 years. I'm sure that, right now in Nigeria, there are some...
Yeah, there are people who...
Can't give you a diagnosis.
Are qualified to give a diagnosis, definitely. Okay. Thank God, like you said, 15 years, a lot has been done. There are places that you can go to and, get a formal assessment. And then once you get that assessment, they're now saying, okay, these are the challenges your child has. He's able to do this. What can he do? What can he not do? And then we have to come up with a plan. How do we help him in areas where, there are deficits and things like that? So you can't do that without a formal assessment.
Okay, so moving forward, you work with a multidisciplinary team.
Yeah.
And I think for Ziza, that included, we had, speech therapists, occupational, behavioral, and all of that. And I think it really helped when we started getting all that information. The other thing is, for me, is with the school, right? And how much you're able to collaborate with the school. Because the school is vital, especially for kids who can't go. Because sometimes having a child at home all the time is not also the best. But even if a child is going to go to school, then there needs to be a tight collaboration with the school. I think we were lucky in terms of the first school that we found for this in Abuja. They didn't have such an advanced resources for autism. But I think we sort of, played a very big role in making sure that they had at least they could mirror what we were doing at home for him at school. But I think that place now, I think that they're doing it more and more. So I think for me, that collaborating with the school is also very, very key. Working closely with the school to execute the plan that you have, I think is very, very key. And of course, we've mentioned a customized plan, and I think the reason why that plan, I think that's number 5. I think the reason why that plan has to be customized is that because every child is different, right?
Every child is definitely different.
It can't be the same plan for the two of them. So
I think a lot of parents, like you mentioned, finances. It's quite expensive. By the time you see the doctor, by the time you get an assessment, 15 years ago, I think I paid about 100,000 or so. I don't know how much they're paying to just get an assessment right now, but it's expensive. So what happens is, once people just hear, you meet another parent who's just starting their journey and says, oh, okay, your son just sounds exactly like mine. He doesn't have no speech, no eye contact. He's also doing all the things that your son is doing. They think that they can just take the whole plan that you
Everything
have for
in
your
one
child
basket.
and then
The one
just
size
do
fits
the
all, yeah.
and do the same thing. But it's not a one size fits all approach, right? You need a customized plan for your child because, like you said, no two children are the same.
So this last time, what were the things that we actually needed for him? If I recall, we needed, like even eating was difficult for him. What are the other things?
Well, clearly we mentioned that he had challenges with his speech. He had a lot of behavioral issues. He had he had issues, fine motor skills, just doing daily activities.
Like potty training.
He wasn't potty trained.
Even bathing was difficult. I mean,
putting on his clothes.
Every bath time was something else. Like
brushing his teeth. He had sensory issues. Just
I remember that
a lot of stuff.
He wouldn't let the toothbrush touch the teeth. Like he just didn't
because he
want
was
it.
too sensitive.
So I was always worried about. I remember we tried everything. We tried the mouthwash, but then he would swallow it. Then it was really. And then at some point, I started.
We had to hold him
cotton.
down.
At some point,
wipe.
I was using cotton to just wipe his teeth. In the beginning, and now that I talk about it. Some of the simplest things
were difficult.
I remember because it took a while for us to get him to be able to agree for his teeth to be brushed, man.
Yeah.
And then I don't even want to talk about
we don't want to get
first haircut.
The haircut, even cutting his nails.
The haircut was something else.
Cutting his nails.
The haircut. I remember it took like 3 of us to get that haircut that day. 3 strong people to get the haircut that day. So.
Even
I think
something as simple as going to the hospital when he was ill, they had to do blood tests or anything like that.
I remember
we had at a time it was like almost 10 people were.
But you know what? In his defense,
had to hold him.
In his defense, that has nothing to do with autism. Like there are people who don't like needles.
Well, but there are people who don't like needles. Yes, I agree. But with him, it was also about sensory. He just didn't want anybody. Nothing. He didn't want anything to touch his skin. So it was about the needle, piercing his skin, and then the fact that somebody was touching him was just enough to set him off. So a lot of sensory issues.
So should I go through the list again? So you can talk about the last one. So I think the first one that you mentioned in terms of the early in terms of getting a plan was consulting a developmental pediatrician. Right, number one. Number 2 was
requesting a formal
assessment and getting that evaluation done by a professional, right? Not just even us. This podcast does not give medical advice, so that's not us.
Just
Number 3 was making sure that the team that you're working with is a multidisciplinary team, right? And that is that the plan that they give is specific to the child based on that individual child. And sort of managing his peculiarities, right? And then number 4 was collaborating with the school to ensure that you can mirror whatever is happening at home. I mean that both things are
if a child is of school age, you just have a plan. It's not like a sheet of paper with all these things written down on it. It has to be interpreted, right? It has to be implemented. And that's why there's a need to collaborate. Because if you just send the child and say, this is what I've been told my child needs, who's going to do the implementation? Yes. Cool, and then there are also, because it's not just the school, we're talking about our system now in Nigeria, right? It's not like you go to a school where every resource that you need is there.
Yeah.
So if you remember, like us, we had to get people from outside individually. So there was a need for them to collaborate and make sure that whatever strategies they were using would help Ziza meet his goals.
His plan.
Right?
And so that's number 4, collaborating with the school. And then number 5 was developing a customized plan. So based on that, you now draft a support plan that will include educational needs,
customize
language.
So maybe if you say customize, some so specific to your child, not anybody else, specific to that particular child. Yes.
And then, so just like we said, for Ziza, it was specifically around getting him to be able to do certain things. So, and then the last one is regular monitoring and updates. I like that this last one because and I mean, I'll let you talk about it more. But I think, for me, the thing about the regular monitoring is because the thing keeps changing.
Yeah.
I think people forget that a kid on the spectrum is growing just like any other kid. And it's not the same kid when he was 2, when he was, like now, Aziza is 15 now. When he was 2, 3, he's quite different now. So I think because, and then the needs change as the child grows. So it's important to monitor, like almost like we were doing, like, I think we were doing even monthly, Abi. We were checking his math, doing our objectives. Okay, we want Ziza to be able to do this by this time, and checking if we hit that milestone. And then when we hit it, we set the new milestone. And before we started allowing him sleep on his own, and being able to sleep through the night without having an issue. So I think because it's dynamic and it's ever changing,
constantly
that
evolving.
Monitoring, I think for me was and I think, for me, even in the monitoring is where I learned most of this, is where you learn a lot of stuff, because you can see things like, I think for me, that's where, because I wasn't always around, because I had to work a lot. I think for me, it was those monitoring sessions or whatever that helped me to catch up and know what's going on and learn what's happening.
So basically it's like a list of things. You mentioned, again, deficits. What can he not do? What can he do? What he's able to do, I mean, that one is easy enough. You're trying to achieve something. So like with Ziza, we had a time when he was still in diapers. I think he stopped wearing diapers at 6 or something, right? So by the time we hit that and he was able to go without wearing diapers, of course that drops from, you drop that off your list, and you face the next thing. So, I mean, so you're constantly monitoring. One thing I would say though is, I'm just sharing with you, for me, when we started, it was more like I was on top of everything, checking and checking and checking. I'm not going to lie. The moment we found a team to work with Ziza, I kind of like relaxed. I think that's a mistake that most parents make, because it's like, okay, now that we have an answer, we have a plan, and we have somebody to implement, you hand over that child. And if the child is at school or something, whether they do 5 hours or how long they're in school, once they come back home, like you're waiting the next day to drop them off with the therapist and everything. But that's actually not a good approach, because I think it continues, right? So it's good that you monitor what's happening at school. You're able to do some at home, right? So that whatever it is you have planned, it's kind of like continuous. It doesn't stop. Because, at some point we had to like intentionally say, okay, I think we're slacking a bit. And we now said, okay. And it's frustrating for the therapist, I think, sometimes, because then they're doing something and then they start to get results, and then the child comes home and then you do something totally different again, and it's like you're setting them back. So I think it's actually good when everyone is on the same page. What are we doing? You have to know. You can't just say, okay, he's just doing therapy. What did they do? They just write a report for you. And I'm sure a lot of people don't even read, like, whatever the report says that is communicated to the parents and all that. So it has to be like...
That your famous journal that you...
Yeah, I had a journal. It's also, we've explained the monitoring and updating and everything. I think even while they do an assessment, for you, when you see a doctor, you should have a list of things that you have noticed, right? So either way, the moment you just find out there's something, I think it's good to have a journal and say, this is what I've noticed, this is what I've noticed. There are certain things in terms of behavior, Ziza would behave a certain way. We didn't just understand it, but I think a lot of times we were able to connect it because we had it in the journal. What happened on that day. Exactly. Something must have happened. And then that way we were able to also figure out what some triggers were.
Connect some dots.
And helped us connect the dots and all that.
Great.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Good.
So
I think we should probably end this episode here. I think for next episode, we're talking more about the crucial intervention that we did for Ziza and sort of how they worked. I think that'll be the next step.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
Thanks
was a good one.
Yeah, well.
Thank you all for listening, and I hope you were able to pick out one or two things.
Catch you on episode 3.
See you, on the next episode.